Another great drill to work on is a live fire version of trigger control at speed. Right? Everybody's kind of heard of trigger control at speed and how important it is to learn how to press the trigger just about any way you possibly can, as quickly as you can, like in response to this little contraption, and being able to hit precise spots. So in this instance, what I've done is I've got three 3/4 inch black pasters strewn across the target to represent the 3 levels of trigger management or trigger control. So those 3 levels, I break them down the exact same way that many people break down sight confirmation levels. We've got confirmation 1, with confirmation 2, and confirmation 3. So as we break those down in visual confirmation levels, confirmation 1 is where we just need to see the minimal amount possible and get on the trigger right away, right? So visually, what that looks like is maybe color confirmation, maybe it's just placing the optic frame to a spot on the target and we're whacking the trigger as fast as we can. Confirmation 2, now we're looking for that controlled streak or a little bit more information from the dot. We're looking for a controlled streak to come into the dot, or I'm sorry, into the center of the target, or that controlled streak to just kind of lift and return, but we're never looking to completely arrest the movement in the dot. And then, of course, confirmation 3, i.e. the higher the number, the more confirmation we need. Confirmation 3 is that I need a perfectly steady dot. This is like the precision needed to make a headshot at 25 yards, or be able to, the precision needed to make a good centered A-zone hit at 25 yards with, let's say, maybe a no-shoot or a partial target next to it as well. Okay, so now as we match those visual confirmation levels, let's talk a little bit about physical confirmation on the trigger. So confirmation 1 on the trigger probably looks like this. So as I hear the beep, I'm looking to just slap all the way through the trigger. There's no take-up made. There's no physical contact made with the trigger before I start the press. It is simply pressing the trigger with as much aggression as I can and trying to minimize movement on the gun. This is where, obviously, grip and structure built on the pistol is extremely important. Without that, it doesn't matter what we do on the trigger. We're probably going to move the gun with an insecure structure on the pistol. Okay, so confirmation 1, we're looking at slapping the hell out of that thing. Confirmation 2, we're looking for just a touch contact on the trigger, right? So we call that like a touch and press. So the touch contact on the trigger, I'm probably going to press through the trigger just a little more smoothly. I'm not looking to upset the sights, and I'm going to match that level of trigger confirmation to the level of visual confirmation needed. And then lastly, confirmation 3, where I need the dot or I need the gun as steady as possible. I'm looking for the most amount of confirmation on the trigger as well. So now we're talking about not only just touching the trigger, but also prepping. And you can see how little the trigger moves, but I need to prep that trigger to the wall and then be able to add just a little bit more pressure to keep the gun as stable as possible, right? Where would I use that level of trigger confirmation? Again, far shots, very high precision shots. We're talking mini poppers at 25 to 30 yards. We're talking headshots at 25 yards. Anywhere where absolute precision is needed, I need a little bit more care and concern on the trigger to match the level of visual confirmation. So now we're going to break this down, and we're going to break this down opposite. We're going to work on confirmation 3, then work it down to confirmation 2, and then finish with confirmation 1. So confirmation 3, I'm going to give myself all the time to prep that trigger and be as prepared as possible to fire the shot. I've got my timer set on random. The goal of this, of course, is to listen for the beep and be able to press that trigger with immediacy. I want to press the trigger and get the trigger press or get the hammer to fall before the end of the beep. In live fire, what that means is I want to break the shot roughly 0.19 to 0.20. If I'm over 0.20 of a second, then basically the timer caught me sleeping. I want to respond immediately. And I'm going to try to maintain the sub 0.2 for every shot I respond to on the beep, regardless of the amount of trigger control. The absolute goal is to both be under 0.20 as well as to have all shots as close to that black spot as possible. So the only thing I'm concerned about is ensuring the rigidity with my structure on the gun and ensuring that the dot stays in relation with that black spot on the target, and then we're going to see what happens. So we're going to start with confirmation 3, then work it down. typically for this drill, I like to be about 5 yards away from the target. You can expand this to 7 yards or whatever, but you're already aiming to a very precise spot on the target. So don't get too carried away with trying to get the distance way out there, because the goal is to try to have your shots as close to holes touching on the black paster as you possibly can. So 3 to 5 yards is plenty. Okay, so gun is loaded. We're right at about 5 yards away. I'm going to prep the trigger and I'm going to wait for the beep. Response was 0.13. Try it again. 0.15. One more time. And we're at 0.13, so easily sub 0.20. That tells me that I'm responding immediately to the random start on the timer. I don't know when the timer's coming. Sometimes it's 1.5 seconds, sometimes it's 3 seconds. So it's keeping me honest and making sure that I'm as prepared as possible to press the trigger. So at this distance, there is going to be a little holdover. I'm placing a dot directly in the center, but at this point, I've got all 3 shots holes touching. So we're pretty solid on that. Now I'm going to move to the middle dot, and I'm going to use my confirmation 2. So I'm working at total confirmation, a little less confirmation to no confirmation. So I'm going to go prep and press, which is what I just did on the first one. Now I'm going to go with just a touch press. You have got to be honest with yourself that you are not cheating and trying to prep the trigger to the wall to be prepared. You've got to be honest with yourself that you're just making touch contact with the trigger so that you can aggressively press through the trigger with no relationship to the wall and just see what happens. Okay? Here we go. We're at 0.18. Again. 0.17. And 0.15. So the same relationship as far as, the same response to the beep, pretty much that I had with the other one. And, well, I've kind of knocked my paster off there, but I've still got 3 holes touching. So at this point, right now, the confirmation level trigger-wise as far as a touch and press versus a prep and press, minimal difference. I would expect that, especially with a 2011 and the way the trigger's designed on it. However, we might see some interesting stuff when we go down to a confirmation 1. That confirmation 1, I'm going to prep myself to press the trigger or slap through the trigger with 0 contact on the trigger whatsoever. My finger is going to be just inside the trigger guard, but making 0 contact with the trigger, and I really want to emphasize a fast slap on the trigger as much as possible. The reason for that is I want to see, again, how good my grip is on the gun and just look at what the confirmation level also gives me on the target. So here we go. Stand by. 0.24, caught me sleeping a little. 0.20. And a 0.17. So at this case, obviously 4 or 5 yards away from the target, not a ton of discernible difference between the levels of trigger prep, but I was able to confirm that my grip and structure was maintained through all 3 levels of trigger control at speed, and I was able to come in under the response time that I wanted and be able to put acceptable accuracy to every single one of those pasters. So this is something to work for. If, for instance, you had shots on your trigger slap, your confirmation 1, that started to really be outside of where your paster's at, you got to find out, are you the type of person that pushes against the gun when it's time to press the trigger, or are you the type of person that pulls the entire trigger with your entire hand when it's time to press the trigger right now? And that'll indicate by pulling the gun low, or that you are pressing the trigger or pulling the trigger with all 4 fingers of the hand. Or if you're a pusher, if you tend to have a response where you push against the recoil to try to make the gun fire, that'll happen by pushing the shots a little bit high. If you're left and right, that tells you that you've got an imbalance of pressures between both hands. Either you're not solidifying the grip with your support hand, or you're over gripping or taking tension. You might need to adjust your hand so that you're neutralizing the tension with the support with the dominant hand and not steering the gun left or right. So anyway, that's trigger control at speed as it refers to live fire. This is how I apply it. Again, this is another one you could come out with about 50 rounds and really test your metal with really good, solid, fundamental control with your structure as well as your trigger manipulation.